a werewolf romance written by dream-telling. Prologue. The doctor's words echoed long after he left the room. "I'm sorry, Miss Hale. It's irreversible." The silence that followed was louder than thunder. Mira sat still on the cold edge of the hospital bed, staring at the pale blue walls. Her hands rested on her knees, trembling slightly not from shock, but from the unbearable need to hold something that wasn't there. A child. Her child. The one she had dreamed of, prayed for, whispered to in the quiet hours of the night gone before it ever existed. The fluorescent light above her flickered. The world around her felt like it was holding its breath. When she finally stood, her reflection in the small mirror by the door startled her. Eyes rimmed red, lips pale, cheeks hollow, she barely recognized herself. A wolfless woman, now declared barren. In a world where lineage was everything, she had just been erased. Outside, the city was washed in gray rain. Her umbrella turned inside out as she stepped into the storm, but she didn't care. Each drop was cold enough to sting, sharp enough to wake her from the haze that threatened to swallow her whole. By the time she reached her small house on the edge of town, night had fallen. She unlocked the door, walked through the quiet rooms, everything untouched, everything exactly as before, yet nothing the same. The nursery she had prepared weeks ago waited at the end of the hall, soft walls painted with clouds, a cradle carved by her father before he passed away, a single stuffed rabbit sitting patiently on the rocking chair. Mira stood at the doorway, clutching the doorframe as if it could keep her upright. She took one step inside, and another. Then she reached the cradle, her fingers brushing over the smooth wood. It was cold, empty. Her breath caught. The sound that tore from her chest wasn't quite a cry, it was the broken gasp of someone who had finally realized she was alone in every sense of the word. She sank to her knees beside the cradle, pressing her forehead against it. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I tried." Du incedient. For a moment, the rain outside slowed, as if even the heavens paused to listen. But then a faint sound. At first, she thought it was the wind howling through the window crack. Then it came again, soft, fragile, almost human. A cry. Mira froze. Her pulse thundered. She turned toward the window. Beyond the glass, through the curtain of rain, she saw it a shadow moving near the edge of the woods. Something small, something alive. The sound came again, clearer this time. A baby's cry. Mira stumbled to her feet, her heart lurching forward before her mind could follow. She flung open the door, the storm slamming against her face. The cry led her toward the trees, toward a light flickering faintly in the distance, a carriage overturned, its wheel still spinning in the mud. She gasped when she saw the woman on the ground, her skin pale as snow, her breath shallow, blood pooling beneath her cloak. In her arms, a baby wrapped in a torn blanket, crying weakly, but alive. Mira knelt beside her. Hey, don't move." The woman's eyes fluttered open, unfocused yet strangely calm. "You're Mira Hale?" Aver sans to the body. Adiv comment helv sans divided to bodienses. Mira's heart pounded. "How do you know my name?" "Because I was told to find you." Lightning split the sky, revealing a silver crest burned into the woman's skin, the mark of the Silver Pine Pack. Mira recognized it instantly. She had once belonged there long ago, before they cast her out for being wolfless. The woman coughed, forcing the words through her broken breath. "Her name is Lyra." Mira blinked, the name searing into her memory. "Please," the woman begged. "Take her. Protect her. Promise me," said. "Wait." Mira reached for her, but it was too late. The woman's eyes went still, her lips parting around one final exhale. The forest fell silent. Only the baby's soft cry remained. Mira stood there in the rain, shaking, staring down at the tiny life placed in her hands. The baby's eyes, pale gray, almost silver, blinked up at her with eerie calmness. A name echoed again in her mind. Lyra. She pressed the child close to her chest, her tears mixing with the rain. "Don't worry," she whispered. "I won't let them take you too." Thunder rolled in the distance. Mira looked toward the dark outline of the mountains, the territory she once called home. Somewhere beyond those ridges, an alpha would wake to learn his mate was gone. And fate, cruel and kind all at once, had just placed his daughter in the hands of the woman destined to change everything. As Mira walked back through the storm, the cradle in her house would no longer be empty, but her life would never be the same. The rain had stopped by dawn. Mira Hale stood by the window, watching the mist lift off the hills like ghosts too tired to haunt. On the table beside her, a pot of tea had gone cold hours ago. The baby Lyra slept soundly in the cradle she had once prepared for a dream that never came true. She looked smaller than ever now, wrapped in a faded blanket that smelled faintly of lavender and rain. A stranger's child. And yet, when Mira looked at her, something deep in her chest shifted a feeling that was neither duty nor charity, but the quiet certainty of belonging. She didn't know what to do next. The woman who had entrusted the baby to her was dead, the carriage wrecked and burned, and that mark, the silver crest, still burned in Mira's memory like a scar from another life. Silver Pine Pack. The name alone made her stomach twist. They had banished her 8 years ago, declared her wolfless, useless, unfit to belong among wolves. She had walked away that day with nothing but her name and the small, bitter comfort of freedom. Now fate had dragged her back. The phone rang. The sharp sound cut through the stillness, jolting her. She hesitated before picking up. "Hello?" A man's voice answered, steady but urgent. "Miss Hale?" Henry did naughty to haven't to. "Yes. This is Dr. Alder from the Silver Pine Medical Ward. I'm calling on behalf of Luna Arwen." Mira's breath caught. "Arwen? She's asked to see you. It's a matter of great urgency. Can you come to Silver Pine immediately?" Mira's grip tightened on the phone. "Arwen's alive?" "Now the spect of the spaded. For now," the man said quietly. "But she won't be much longer." For a moment, she couldn't speak. Her heart hammered, memory flooding in laughter, shared hunts, whispered secrets under starlight. Arwen had been her closest friend before everything fell apart, before Mira lost her wolf. "I'll come," she said finally. She looked at Lyra, who stirred in her sleep as if sensing her decision. Mira whispered, "We're going home." The journey took 3 hours. Fog rolled down the mountains, wrapping the road in white silence. By the time she reached Silver Pine's gates, dusk had turned the forest to molten gold. The guards at the border looked at her in disbelief. "Mira Hale," one of them said. "You were banished," she finished. "I know, but Luna Arwen called for me." They hesitated, then stepped aside. The gates opened slowly, groaning like they hadn't moved in years. Inside, the air was thick with scent pine, smoke, and the faint metallic tang of blood. The mansion loomed at the top of the hill, every window glowing faintly amber. She climbed the steps one by one, her legs trembling not from fear, but from memories pressing against her chest. A nurse led her to the Luna's chamber. The room smelled of herbs and candle wax. Arwen lay propped on silk pillows, her skin almost translucent, her breathing shallow. Beside her bed stood a man tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black, his back turned. When he turned to look at her, the world tilted. Kael Draven, Alpha of Silver Pine. The last time Mira had seen him, he'd been younger, stronger, a storm in human form. Now he looked like a man carved from stone and exhaustion. His golden eyes flicked over her face, recognition flickering for only an instant before his walls came up. "You came," Arwen whispered, voice soft as air. Mira moved closer. "You shouldn't be talking." Arwen smiled faintly. "It's the only thing I can still do." She reached out a trembling hand. Mira knelt beside her, taking it gently. "I don't have much time," Arwen said. "Kael will hate me for this, but I had to see you." Mira shook her head. "Don't. Save your strength." "No," Arwen whispered. "You need to listen. I'll tenges be, sir." Her eyes shifted toward the cradle beside her bed, a small white bundle, motionless but alive. "She's my daughter," Arwen said. "Her name is Lyra." Mira's heart stuttered. "She has no wolf," Arwen continued, tears welling in her eyes. "Like you." Mira's throat tightened. "She's perfect," Arwen whispered, smiling through the pain. "And I want you to raise her." Kael's voice cut through the room. "Arwen." It was the voice of command, low, dangerous, and breaking. "Don't do this." Arwen's hand trembled in Mira's. "Promise me, Arwen. Promise me, Mira." "Ball is never bang." Mira swallowed hard. "I promise." Arwen's body relaxed, her eyes drifting toward the window where the last light of dusk bled across the sky. "Thank you," she whispered. Now she won't be alone. Kael turned away, his shoulders rigid. A moment later, the heart monitor gave a long, steady tone. Mira's hand slipped from Arwen's as the nurse rushed forward. Kael stood frozen, his alpha composure breaking apart one silent breath at a time. Mira looked down at the baby now beginning to stir, her tiny hand reaching for nothing. She lifted her gently. Kael's voice cracked behind her. "Put her down." Mira turned to him, her eyes steady despite the tears. "You lost your mate. Not your daughter. Kael's jaw clenched. Leave. Before I forget who you were to her. Mira nodded once. She pressed a kiss to Lyra's forehead, then to Arwen's cold hand. Goodbye, my friend. En fermentis the bee, and stelsen donking in the staptid. As she stepped out of the room, the nurse whispered softly. Where will you go? Mira didn't look back. Anywhere fate sends me. Outside, the moon rose full and pale, bathing the forest in light. The cradle in her home would not be empty tonight, but the child she carried in her arms was not hers to keep. Not yet. The night air was sharp, filled with pine and memory. By the time Mira returned home, dawn had already begun to break, pale light spilling over the forest edge. She set Lyra down in the cradle, the same one that had stood empty for so long. Now it was full, and yet, Mira had never felt more hollow. She brushed a strand of hair from the baby's forehead. You're safe now, she whispered, though she wasn't sure it was true, because she could still feel it, the weight of Kael's stare, the fury barely contained beneath his grief. She had seen it before, years ago, when he had been her alpha. He had looked at her then with disappointment. Now he looked at her like she was a ghost that had come to steal what was his. The kettle whistled softly in the kitchen. Mira moved through the quiet house, every step heavy. It felt wrong to be here safe when Arwen's body was probably still warm in the Silver Pine Infirmary. She closed her eyes, remembering the moment Arwen's hand went cold, the way the room had gone still, and the sound Kael made, not quite a growl, not quite a sob, something that didn't belong to an alpha or a man, but to something older, wilder, broken. The phone rang again. Her heart jumped. For a split second, she thought it might be Kael demanding the child back, or worse. But it wasn't. It was Rowan. She froze before answering. Mira, his voice came, smooth, sharp, and cold. You didn't come home last night. I told you, she said softly. It's over. Anita stare-quieted. I don't care what you think it is, he snapped. You're still my wife. Her grip tightened on the receiver. Not anymore. There was a pause then, a laugh that sent ice through her veins. Let me guess, Rowan said. You found another stray? You always did love fixing what's broken. Kay. She glanced toward the cradle, anger rising despite her exhaustion. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, but I do, Rowan sneered. That baby isn't yours, Mira. It never will be. And you'll never be a mother. You were born defective. The words struck harder than she expected. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Then something inside her shifted the same quiet steel that had carried her through exile, through loneliness, through every whispered insult. She exhaled slowly. You're right, she said. I wasn't born to be a mother. I chose to be one. And she hung up. The silence afterward felt heavier than any argument. Lyra stirred in her sleep, tiny fists flexing. Mira sat beside her, watching her breathe. Outside, the first rays of sunlight broke through the mist, painting the room in silver. 2 days later, a black SUV stopped at her gate. Mira's pulse quickened when she saw him step out. Kael, dressed in dark wool and leather, eyes hidden behind shadow. He didn't knock. He never needed to. When she opened the door, his gaze met hers cold, precise, but something in it trembled. Where is she? Mira hesitated, then stepped aside. Lyra lay in the cradle, cooing softly, reaching toward the light. Kael crossed the room with deliberate slowness, kneeling beside her. The transformation in him was almost painful to watch, from alpha to father, from rage to fragile wonder. He touched the edge of the blanket. His fingers shook. She looks like her mother. She has your eyes, Mira said quietly. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Kael rose to his full height, his expression hardening again. She belongs with me. Mira nodded. I know. He blinked, clearly not expecting agreement. But she needs someone to care for her now, Mira continued. You're grieving. The pack. The pack is my responsibility, he cut in. And she's my blood. Mira stepped closer, her voice calm. Then prove it. Kael frowned. What are you saying? Setter despeden. Arwen didn't ask me to steal your daughter, she said. She asked me to protect her. If you want her safe, let me stay, at least until she's strong enough. Kael's jaw tightened. For a long moment, the air between them felt electric, the same quiet defiance she'd shown him years ago as a young Omega who refused to bow. Finally, he exhaled. You have 3 months. Mira nodded. That's enough. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. Don't mistake my patience for forgiveness. She met his eyes without flinching. Don't mistake mine for fear. When the door closed, Mira's heart was still racing, not from anger, but from something she didn't want to name. She turned back to the cradle. Lyra was smiling now, reaching toward the sunlight. Mira touched her tiny hand and whispered, "Looks like we're going home again." That evening, as the car carried them through the forest roads toward the Silver Pine estate, Mira looked out at the fading sky. The trees whispered secrets only wolves could hear. And though she could no longer shift, she swore she felt something move deep inside her, something old and awakening. Fate, perhaps, or the faint heartbeat of a bond that had been broken long before she ever understood it. The Silver Pine mansion was nothing like Mira remembered. Once, it had been a place of laughter and music. Luna Arwen's garden blooming with silver lilies, pack members strolling through the courtyard. Now, it felt like a cathedral built for ghosts. The car stopped before the grand iron gates. Kael didn't speak. He simply stepped out, his boots crunching against gravel, his presence sharp enough to make the guards straighten instantly. When he turned toward her, Mira felt her spine stiffen. "You'll stay in the East Wing," he said curtly. "The child's room is adjacent. Don't wander. And he too have an every with Reaver." His voice was low, heavy, and distant, the voice of a man forcing control over something that refused to be contained. Mira only nodded. Understood. As they walked through the corridor, the silence pressed in. Every portrait on the walls seemed to watch her, whispering of hierarchy and power, of Luna Arwen's absence. The smell of pine resin and burnt sage lingered. At the far end of the hall, an older woman waited, dark-haired, dressed in crisp black linen. "This is Matron Ilsa," Kael said. "She runs the household. Anything you need, go through her." The woman's eyes flicked over Mira with polite disdain. "Alpha," she murmured. "We've already prepared a nurse for the child." "No." Kael's tone cut through the air. "Mira stays. That's final. I'll go and help." A flicker of surprise crossed Ilsa's face, but she bowed and stepped aside. When they reached the room, Kael gestured to the cradle by the window. "You'll find everything you need here." Then, softer, almost imperceptibly, he added, "She cries when it rains." Mira turned toward him. "So do I. See when it be Selvin in Cedar." Kael's gaze lingered a moment longer than necessary, then he turned and left without another word. The first night was restless. Lyra stirred constantly, whimpering as the wind howled through the eaves. Mira sang quietly, the same lullaby her mother once used, words of wolves and moonlight, of mothers who loved in silence. At some point, the door creaked open. Kael stood there, shirt half-buttoned, eyes darker than the room. "She won't sleep," Mira said, her voice hushed. "Every time I put her down, she wakes." Kael crossed the floor silently, his movements heavy with exhaustion. "Let me." He lifted Lyra with surprising gentleness, resting her against his bare chest. The baby's cries softened almost instantly. Mira watched, heart aching not with jealousy, but something older, deeper. "She knows your heartbeat," she whispered. Kael's eyes met hers. "And you know hers." The air between them thickened. For a moment, the world was just the three of them, breath, warmth, and the fragile peace of a shared loss. Then Kael handed her back. "Get some rest," he said, voice rough. "Tomorrow will be long." He turned to leave, but Mira's voice stopped him. "Kael," she said softly, "Arwen would want you to grieve, not disappear." His shoulders tensed. "I don't grieve," he said after a moment. "I rebuild." And then he was gone. Days passed. Mira learned the rhythm of the mansion when the servants changed shifts, when Kael left for the council house, when the wolves patrolled the borders. She spent her mornings tending to Lyra, her afternoons wandering the old gardens. Arwen's touch still lingered there, rose bushes neatly pruned, a swing half hidden by ivy. Sometimes she caught Kael watching from the balcony above, unreadable, as if trying to decide whether she belonged or merely filled a void he couldn't face. One evening, as dusk bled into night, Mira sat in the nursery, rocking Lyra to sleep. The door opened softly. Kael leaned against the frame, arms folded. "She doesn't cry around you anymore," he said. "She feels safe," Mira replied. He hesitated, then walked inside. "Arwen used to hum the same song," he said quietly, "before I left for hunts." Mira smiled faintly. "She taught me." For a long moment they said nothing. Then Kael's voice dropped. "She trusted you more than anyone." "She had reason to," Mira murmured. "She had reason not to. Next are saved. Would Rebettit Safi was bother has bended." The words hung between them like smoke. Mira looked up sharply. "You think I wanted this?" "I think you were always where I couldn't bear to look." Kael said, his eyes glinting. In the corners of rooms, in her laughter. You were the reminder I couldn't erase. Her breath hitched. Then why let me stay? Because Lyra needs you. Mira's voice trembled. And you? Kael's jaw clenched. I need silence. He turned and left, the door closing with finality. But Mira knew the truth silence had never healed anyone. That night, as the moon rose full and pale over the forest, Mira stood by the window, Lyra asleep in her arms. Through the glass, she saw Kael in the courtyard, staring up at the same sky, his hand pressed to the mark over his heart where a bond once burned and now lay buried under duty. For the first time in years, Mira whispered into the dark, maybe we're both strangers here. And somewhere deep in the house, a wolf howled low and broken, as if agreeing. The Silverpine estate never truly slept. Even at night, the air hummed with quiet tension, the restless energy of wolves pretending to live as men. Mira learned to walk its halls in silence, the creaking floors, the faint scent of pine oil and candle smoke, the hum of something ancient buried within the stone. She memorized it all. Days became a blur of routine. Feed Lyra, bathe her, sing her to sleep. Kael came and went like a ghost in his own home, sometimes gone for hours, sometimes standing by the nursery door at dawn, watching without speaking. The staff treated Mira with cautious politeness, but behind every bow and whispered greeting lay the same question. Why is she here? Even the walls seemed to echo it. It was on the 5th night that Mira first heard it, a low, rhythmic sound, almost like a heartbeat, pulsing through the east wing. She followed it down a narrow corridor lined with portraits. The eyes in the paintings seemed to follow her alphas long dead, Lunas frozen in soft smiles that never reached their eyes. At the end of the hall stood a locked door. The sound came from within, steady, pulsing, alive. Before she could reach for the handle, a voice spoke behind her. You shouldn't be here. She turned sharply. Kael stood in the shadows, half his face illuminated by the torchlight. What's in there? She asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer until she could see the faint scar running along his jaw, something she hadn't noticed before. Old things, he said finally. Things that remember too much. Mira frowned. You mean her? Kael's eyes flashed gold for a moment, his wolf stirring beneath the surface. You think you know what you're asking, but you don't. I lost her too, Mira said quietly. His expression darkened. Don't you dare compare your loss to mine. For a moment they stood inches apart, breathing the same charged air. Then Lyra's faint cry echoed down the hall, breaking the tension like glass. Kael stepped back. Go to her, he said, and stay away from this wing. The following morning, a storm swept through the valley. Mira sat by the window, rocking Lyra as thunder rumbled. From her seat, she could see Kael out in the courtyard rain, soaking through his clothes, his hands clenched around a shovel. He was digging, alone. By the time she reached him, mud splattered her dress, wind whipping her hair into her face. Kael, she shouted. What are you doing? A joft of wildflighted as dade. He looked up, his eyes wild and bright in the storm, fixing what shouldn't have been broken. The ground before him was uneven, a grave that had been dug up and then filled again. Mira's stomach turned. This is madness. Kael dropped the shovel, rain streaking down his face like tears. Madness is what comes after silence. He walked past her, his scent heavy with grief and rain. You wanted to know what's in the East Wing? It's her room. Arwen's? He stopped. No. Theirs. She frowned. Theirs? He didn't turn. Our child. The one we lost before Lyra. Tells her. The wind howled between them. Mira felt the breath leave her chest. Kael, He lifted a hand, silencing her. Don't pity me. I buried them both once. I can do it again. Then he was gone, swallowed by the rain. That night, when the storm finally broke, Mira found him sitting by the hearth, a bottle untouched beside him. The firelight threw shadows across his face, carving hollows beneath his eyes. He looked human. For the first time. You should sleep, she said softly. He murmured. Every time I close my eyes, I hear her voice. It used to comfort me. Now it feels like a curse. Mira knelt beside him, careful not to touch. You're not cursed, Kael. You're grieving. He gave a bitter laugh. You think there's a difference? Grief doesn't rot the soul, she said. Guilt does. And what is the self Olive and time hurt? His eyes snapped to hers sharp, haunted. You talk like you've known both. She met his gaze. I have. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then, slowly, Kael reached for the small wooden box on the table beside him. Inside lay a child's bracelet, tiny, silver, engraved with the name Sarah, he whispered. She was only 3 days old. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Mira closed the box gently and set it aside. You buried her body, Kael, but you never buried her pain. His breath trembled. What would you have me do? Let yourself be human again. He said it. He laughed once, softly. That's easy for you. You never had to lead a pack that eats its weak. She stood, her voice steady. Maybe that's why they need you to stop being their alpha and start being their father. He looked up sharply. And what are you, Mira Hale? I have said into my Ulzus. Her answer came without hesitation. The one who will remind you what mercy feels like. She turned to leave, but before she reached the door, he spoke again quietly, almost as if he didn't mean to. When she died, I wished the goddess had given me someone else, someone who could understand the curse of surviving. Mira paused, her hand trembling against the doorframe. Maybe she already did. Later that night, when the house finally grew still, Mira stood in the east hall again. The locked door was gone. In its place, an open room bathed in silver light, a child's bed, untouched toys, and a single portrait of Arwen holding an infant that never lived long enough to open its eyes. Mira's throat ached. She whispered into the empty air. Rest, little one. Behind her, a floorboard creaked. Kael stood in the doorway, silent, his expression unreadable, his eyes raw. Good night, Alpha, she said softly. He only nodded, but when she passed him, she heard him whisper, Good night, Mira, and for the first time, his voice didn't sound like command, it sounded like confession. The wind had quieted, but the house still breathed. Every beam of wood, every window pane seemed to murmur with the memory of rain. Mira sat awake by the cradle, her hand gently rocking it back and forth. Lyra slept soundly, one tiny hand curled around the edge of her blanket. In the dim light, her face looked peaceful, untouched by grief, unbothered by legacy. Mira envied her for that. She had just begun to drift into half-sleep when the door creaked open. Kael stood in the doorway again, barefoot, shirt undone, the faint shimmer of moonlight tracing the muscles of his chest. His presence filled the room before he spoke. She woke me, he said simply. Mira's voice was soft. She hasn't cried. I know. He walked closer, stopping beside the cradle. His gaze lingered on Lyra, and for a brief moment, the hardness in his face melted away. She sleeps like her mother, he murmured. Mira hesitated. You loved her very much. Kael didn't look at her. I still do. Love doesn't die. It just changes shape. That have gotten me changed had it. There was a rawness in his tone, not tenderness, but exhaustion, as if the act of remembering cost him more than forgetting ever could. Does it hurt less when you say it out loud? Mira asked quietly. Kael turned to her, eyes glinting amber in the half-light. No, but it feels honest. Thingst, and enstries, and we self-thingstries. He sank into the chair across from her, elbows on his knees. The silence between them was heavy but not cruel. It felt human. She used to sing to the moon, Kael said suddenly. Said it was where souls rest between lives. Mira smiled faintly. My mother told me that too. She said the moon remembers every promise made under its light. Kael's gaze softened. Then it must hate me. Mira looked at him, really looked. The alpha everyone feared was gone. In his place sat a man haunted by ghosts he couldn't bury. You're not the only one the moon remembers, she said. He studied her face as if trying to find the lie. But there was none. Only quiet truth, the kind that asks for nothing in return. When Lyra stirred, Mira instinctively reached out, but Kael was faster. He lifted the baby into his arms with practiced ease, the movement so natural it made her chest ache. Do you want her? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mira shook her head. She's calm. Stay. So he did. He held the child against his chest, pacing slowly. Mira watched the way his hand cradled the back of Lyra's head, the way his expression softened when she sighed in her sleep. She feels safe with you, Mira said. Kael gave a quiet laugh. Or maybe she's just too tired to be afraid. Mira tilted her head. And you? Are you tired? I don't, Lise. He looked at her then, and the question seemed to cut deeper than she meant it to. Yes, he said. But I don't sleep. Not since the night she died. Mira's heart tightened. You blame yourself. Kael's jaw flexed. Of course I do. I was Alpha. I was her mate. I should have protected her. Carrier. And who protected you? The words fell between them like embers. Kael froze, as if the thought had never occurred to him. His throat moved once before he spoke. No one. Mira stood, crossing the room quietly. She stopped just close enough that their shadows touched, though they did not. You can't lead the living if you keep following the dead, she whispered. Kael's breath caught. For a moment, his wolf stirred not with violence, but recognition. Something ancient in him responded to her voice, her scent, the calm steadiness she carried like light through fog. He stepped closer, just enough that she could feel the warmth of his body. Mira, he said, her name a warning and a plea at once. She met his gaze, unflinching. I'm not her, I know. Then stop looking at me like I am. He exhaled sharply, turning away. You think it's that simple? He said, her ender distraught. No, she said softly. Nothing ever is. The silence stretched again, not empty, but heavy with everything they couldn't say. Finally, Kael set Lyra back in the cradle. The baby sighed and turned in her sleep, her tiny fingers brushing against his. He looked down at her, then back at Mira. She'll wake soon, he murmured. Mira nodded. Then we'll wake with her. As he moved toward the door, he paused, his hand resting against the frame. You should get some rest. I will. He didn't move. The firelight flickered against his back, and for a brief second, he looked almost lost. Then, so softly she barely heard it, he said, Good night, Mira. Her heart caught in her throat. Good night, Kael. The door closed quietly behind him. Mira stood for a long time, staring at the cradle, then at the moonlight spilling across the floor. She realized that for the first time since she'd held Lyra that stormy night, she wasn't afraid. Not of Kael, not of the pack, not even of the shadows. Because somewhere deep inside, something was changing. Not love, not yet, but something like forgiveness. Something that felt a lot like beginning. The morning after the sleepless night came with strange calm. The rain had stopped. The world outside Silverpine seemed to breathe again, but the house remained caught in a stillness that felt deliberate, as if afraid to move. Mira woke early, long before the first bell rang from the village below. Lyra slept quietly, the faintest smile on her lips. Mira lingered by the window, tracing a line through the fog on the glass. Somewhere beyond it, Kael was training his guards. His command voice carried even through stone walls, sharp, controlled, unwavering. He had mastered the art of silence, she thought. And she had mastered surviving it. When Matron Ilsa entered with the morning tea, her expression was colder than usual. The Alpha requests your presence in the study, she said. Mira hesitated. Did he say why? No, but if I were you, I wouldn't keep him waiting. The study was a cathedral of shadow and memory. Tall shelves climbed toward the ceiling, filled with records, old maps, relics of a lineage that had ruled Silverpine for centuries. Kael stood by the hearth, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. You wanted to see me? She asked softly. He didn't turn immediately. You went into the east wing. Mira's heart skipped. Ah, yes. His voice was even, but beneath it she heard restraint. You disobeyed me. I heard something, she said. A sound. It led me there. Kael finally turned. His eyes caught the firelight, molten, unreadable. There are things in this house better left untouched. Like truth, she said quietly. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then, instead of anger, Kael's expression changed just slightly. Arwen used to say the same thing. And did you listen? He was like now. He gave a humorless laugh. Never. The silence stretched until it felt like something alive between them. Finally, Kael gestured toward a stack of leather-bound journals on his desk. If you're so desperate for truth, he said, start there. They were hers. Mira frowned. Arwen's journals? Unquarted. Everything she ever wrote, Kael said. I can't bear to read them. Her hand trembled as she reached for the top one. The scent of old parchment and lavender filled the air Arwen sent. She opened the first page carefully. If you are reading this, it means the goddess has taken me home. The words blurred for a moment before Mira blinked the tears away. The entries began years ago, full of small details. Pack meetings, winter hunts, festivals under the full moon. But near the end, Arwen's tone changed darker, fearful. Kael dreams of another, a woman with eyes like twilight and hands that burn cold. I see her in the reflection when he sleeps. I feel her in his silence. The goddess told me I was chosen to bear his child, but not his heart. Ken Frenzens getting in Dodd. Mira's pulse quickened. She turned the page. Tonight, I asked the oracle what binds a soul to another. She said the truth can be rewritten if you're willing to pay the price. I said yes. The next pages were smudged, written in hurried ink, words half erased, others scorched by candle flame. But Mira could still make out fragments. The spell is done, bond severed. She will not remember him. He must never know. Her throat tightened. She closed the journal, fingers trembling. When she looked up, Kael was watching her. "What did she write?" he asked. "Nothing you'd want to hear." Annie waited. He stepped closer. "Tell me anyway." Mira hesitated, then whispered, "She loved you enough to break you." Kael froze. For a long moment the fire was the only sound. Then he said quietly, "You think I didn't know she lied to me?" Mira frowned. "You knew?" Kael's jaw clenched. "I could smell it in her heartbeat, in her fear, but I let her believe I didn't, because I needed her to stay." He turned away, his voice rough. "The night she died, she called your name, not mine." Mira's breath hitched. "What?" Kael looked at her then, eyes raw, haunted. She whispered, "Forgive her. I thought she meant the goddess. Now I'm not so sure." The weight of his gaze pinned her in place. She wanted to look away, but something deep inside wouldn't let her. "Why would she ask me to protect Lyra?" Mira whispered. "Because she trusted you more than anyone," Kael said. "Or because she knew I was the one meant to find you." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Kael's eyes darkened. "What are you saying?" Mira swallowed hard. "That maybe your bond wasn't broken, just misplaced. It's not teenier that is never." The silence that followed was unbearable. Kael took a slow step toward her, then another, until she could feel the warmth of him like a fire too close to touch. "You're saying you're my fated one." "I'm saying the goddess doesn't make mistakes," she whispered. Kael's breath trembled. "If that's true, then every breath I've taken since she died is a sin." Mira's voice broke. "Then let it be our sin." The words hung between them, fragile, electric, forbidden. For the first time, Kael didn't move away. He reached up, his hand hovering near her face but never touching, as if afraid the truth itself might burn him. The moment shattered when Lyra cried out from the nursery. Mira stepped back, her pulse wild. "I should go." Kael nodded once, his voice rough. "Yes, you should. It is best kind. As she turned to leave, he said her name quietly, almost like prayer. "Mira." She stopped. His voice was low. "If the goddess truly meant this, she's crueler than I ever imagined." Mira didn't look back. Or kinder. Courting the sand as a potty pressed into say. That night, long after the house had gone still, Mira returned to the journal. There were only 2 words on the final page, written in trembling ink. "Forgive her." Mira closed the book and whispered to the darkness, "I'm trying." Have now the saying everybody wanted. Outside, the moon rose pale and cold, spilling its light across the silver pine crest. And somewhere deep within the forest, a wolf howled not in mourning, but in awakening. Sleep would not come. For Kael, it had long been a stranger, but tonight, the silence itself felt heavier, as if the walls of Silverpine were listening. He sat by the open window, the moon a pale scar across the sky. The night breeze carried the scent of wet cedar, lavender, and something else, Mira's scent. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her standing beneath the torchlight, her words echoing in his head. "Then let it be our sin." The wolf in him stirred restlessly, pacing behind his ribs like a caged beast. It remembered her heartbeat, her voice, the quiet courage in her gaze. But the man still carried the weight of graves. He pressed his palms to his temples, whispering a name that wasn't hers. Arwen, but even the dead did not answer. Down the hall, Mira tossed in her bed, caught in a dream that felt too vivid to be her own. The scent of sage and blood filled the air. She stood in a stone chamber lit by flickering candles, the walls etched with runes. A woman knelt before the altar, golden hair spilling over her shoulders, her voice trembling as she whispered a prayer. "Goddess of bonds, sever this thread. Let him forget the one who was meant to be mine." Mira's heart pounded. She knew that voice, Arwen, and behind her a figure stood, cloaked in shadow. The oracle. Her eyes glowed silver. "The spell demands balance," she said. "One bond for another. One heart awakened, one heart lost. I don't think is love today." Arwen nodded, tears streaking her face. "Take mine." The runes flared with blinding light, and Mira felt it, a tearing pain in her chest, as if a thread had been pulled through her very soul. The world blurred, and the dream dissolved into darkness. When Mira woke, her sheets were damp with sweat, her pulse wild. Outside, dawn was breaking, soft gray light seeping through the curtains, and in her chest, she felt it again, that strange pull, that echo of something ancient and alive. She whispered to herself. She gave me her bond. 5 Annie was be in this taller formly in the styres and the Mormons properist, and like standingly in the ladder. Later that morning, she found Kael in the courtyard. He was shirtless, his skin glistening with sweat, his movements sharp and violent as he trained alone. The sound of his strikes against the wooden post rang through the air, each one harder than the last, as if he was punishing himself with every blow. Mira stood in the doorway, watching in silence. When he finally stopped, he turned toward her, breath ragged, chest rising and falling. "You should be resting," he said. "So should you." He wiped the sweat from his brow. "I don't sleep well." "I know," she said quietly. "I dream for both of us." Kael's expression hardened. "Dreams are for those who can afford them. Or for those trying to survive them," she countered. Their eyes met, two storms colliding. Something in Kael faltered. "You shouldn't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you see me." Mira took a step closer. "Then stop hiding." Kael exhaled sharply, turning away. "You don't understand what you're asking." "Thanks, Gettert. I understand more than you think," she said softly. "Arwen made a choice. One that bound both of us." His head snapped up. "What did you say?" "She gave her bond to me," Mira whispered. "She traded her soul to the goddess so you could be free. But the bond didn't disappear. It came to me, and it was in the Badididi-Wadi." Kael froze. "That's impossible." "Then why do you feel it?" He didn't answer, but the way his hands trembled, the way his heartbeat quickened, it was answer enough. Mira stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Every time you look at me, you remember something you shouldn't. Every time I dream, I see what she saw. Don't you see? The goddess didn't take your mate away, Kael." She changed her face. Kael's wolf roared inside him, a sound only he could hear. He staggered back, eyes flashing gold. "Stop," he growled. "You don't know what you're saying." "It was pride in that Wakid. I know the truth," she said. "You were never meant to love her. You were meant to love me." The silence that followed was deafening. Kael's voice was low, dangerous. "Do you think that comforts me?" Mira's eyes filled with tears. "It wasn't meant to." He turned sharply, fists clenched. "Then what do you want from me?" "Nothing," she said. "Except honesty." Kael's breath came fast, uneven. "Honesty will destroy us both. Then destroy me." The words broke something in him. In 2 strides, he was standing before her, his hand at her jaw, his breath trembling. "You don't know what you're asking for." "Yes," she whispered. "I do." For a heartbeat, the world stilled. Kael's thumb brushed her cheek, a touch so light it could have been imagined. Then he pulled away as if burned. "Leave," he said hoarsely, "before I forget what mercy is." Also, Mira's voice shook. "You already have." She walked past him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Kael stood there long after she'd gone, staring up at the sun that had just begun to rise over the forest. Its light was too bright, too warm, and yet all he felt was the cold. That night, Mira sat by the window again, the moon hanging heavy above the pines. She whispered to the wind, "Why me?" But deep down, she already knew. Because some bonds aren't chosen, they're remembered. The moon that night hung blood-red over Silverpine. It was the kind of sky that made even the wolves hide their eyes. Mira felt it before she saw it, the pulse, deep beneath her skin, the echo of something ancient and wrong. Her reflection in the mirror flickered. For a split second, her eyes glowed gold, not her color, not her soul. She stumbled back, breath hitching. Down the hall, a low growl answered her heartbeat. "Kael." He burst through the door moments later, his presence filling the room like thunder. His eyes were already shifting, glowing bright amber, veins dark against his skin. "Mira," he rasped. "Stay away. I mean, consider instead," but she didn't move. "You're changing." He staggered forward, gripping the wall. "The curse, it's tied to the moon, to the bond." "The bond? You felt it too," he said through gritted teeth. "Didn't you? You should happening into common sorry with head." She hesitated, the mark on her wrist was burning now, faintly glowing beneath her skin like molten silver. "I don't know what this is." Kael's breath came in ragged gasps. "It's her spell breaking. The goddess's balance, she's taking her payment. Adhisated Wacidence's wire." He fell to his knees, claws tearing through the wooden floor. Mira rushed to him, kneeling, ignoring the heat radiating off his body. "Kael, look at me." His eyes flicked up, gold and wild. Get out. No. Do you want to die? He roared. I already did once, she whispered. When she took you from me. Something inside him stilled. For the first time, her words reached the part of him that was still human. Mira. The way he said her name, not as command, not as warning, but as recognition, made her heart tremble. The curse surged again. Kael doubled over, a snarl ripping from his throat. His skin shimmered, shifting, half wolf, half man, caught between worlds. Mira pressed her palm to his chest. Listen to me, she whispered, her voice trembling. You don't have to fight it alone. He steadied one of the rested. The heat beneath her hand pulsed heartbeat against heartbeat, the rhythm sinking. Kael's breathing slowed. His claws dug into the floor, then stilled. The mark on Mira's wrist flared brighter, matching the one that had begun to appear over his heart, a sigil, circular and ancient, carved by the goddess herself. They both gasped. What's happening? She asked. Kael's voice was a rasp. It's the bond. It's remembering. Any day. Then came the voice, soft, familiar, echoing through the walls. Two souls, one curse. The wolf and the moon cannot live apart. Mira's eyes widened. Arwen. The air shimmered, and for an instant, Arwen's figure appeared translucent, standing in the moonlight, her gaze calm and sorrowful. She looked at Kael first. I was never your mate. I was your shield. She was the one fated for you, but I was chosen to bear your curse. Kael's eyes filled with tears he didn't understand. Why would you? Because you weren't meant to die yet, Arwen said gently, and neither was she. Claude. Her gaze turned to Mira. I gave you my bond so you could save him, but every gift from the goddess demands a price. Mira's voice shook. What price? Arwen smiled faintly. You'll know when the moon turns white again. Then the vision vanished, the light collapsing into silence. Kael slumped forward, the transformation fading, his body trembling with exhaustion. Mira caught him, holding his weight against her chest. He was burning hot, his breath shallow. She said I wasn't meant to die, she whispered. Then what are we? Kael opened his eyes slowly. Condemned. Anyone a film concepts things. No, she said, brushing the hair from his face. Connected. His hand found hers, weak but deliberate. You should have run when you could. I did, she said softly. But fate runs faster. He gave a faint, broken laugh, the first true sound of life she'd heard from him in weeks. Then his head fell against her shoulder, and she realized he'd passed out. Hours later, the storm broke. Mira sat by the hearth, Kael asleep beside her, the moonlight spilling across his face. She traced the glowing mark over his heart, the twin of her own. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat shared, ancient, eternal. She whispered to the fire, We're bound by her death and by her love. Outside, wolves howled under the red moon, not mourning this time, but answering. And in the echo of their cries, Mira understood. The curse wasn't meant to destroy them. It was meant to bring them back together. Kael awoke to the sound of rain against glass. For a moment, he thought it was the same night, the same storm, the same ache in his chest, but the room smelled different. Lavender, firewood, Mira. He sat up slowly, every muscle aching. The light of dawn filtered through sheer curtains, soft and silver. Mira sat nearby, half asleep in the chair, her head resting on her hand. Her hair had come loose, falling over her shoulder in gentle waves. Kael stared. Something inside him twisted. For the briefest second, he saw Arwen smiling under moonlight, humming to the same rhythm Mira's breathing made now. He blinked, and the image broke. It was Mira, but the feeling, the warmth in his chest, the pull between them was the same. Mira, he whispered. She stirred, lifting her head. You're awake. He rubbed at his temples. How long? 2 days, she said softly. You collapsed after the curse hit. Kael frowned. The curse. It didn't kill you, she said. It marked you. He looked down. The sigil over his heart still glowed faintly beneath his skin, faint silver threads pulsing with every heartbeat. He reached out, tracing it. And you? Mira turned her wrist. The same mark burned there, smaller but identical. We share it. Kael's jaw tightened. Then the bond is real. Again. It always was, she said quietly. Silence filled the room, not empty, but charged. Kael rose unsteadily to his feet. The motion made him sway, but Mira reached out instinctively, catching his arm. He froze at the touch. Her hand was warm. Familiar, too familiar. Don't, he said softly. Please. Now the Wade why, Mira's brow furrowed. Kael, every time you touch me, I remember something that never happened. She hesitated. Tell me. Kael's voice dropped to a whisper. You standing in Arwen's garden, sunlight in your hair. You laughing beside me at the river. You saying my name like it belonged to you. And all taken vel just to valentide. He looked up, eyes clouded with something between awe and horror. But those aren't your memories, are they? Mira swallowed hard. Maybe they are now. Kael stepped back, shaking his head. No, the goddess is cruel, but not that cruel. She wouldn't make me relive. She didn't, Mira interrupted, her voice trembling. You are. Because your heart knows before your mind does. He stared at her. What are you saying? That it wasn't the curse that brought us together, Kael. It was recognition. He turned away, hands trembling. You want me to believe I loved you before I ever met you? No, she said. I want you to remember it. The words hit him like lightning. Memories flickered at the edges of his vision, flashes of laughter in the rain. A promise whispered beneath stars, two shadows standing before a goddess's altar. He gasped, gripping the table for balance. Stop, he said hoarsely. I can't. You can, Mira said, stepping closer. You've just forgotten how. Kael turned sharply. Why are you doing this? Because if you don't remember me, this curse will consume us both. Her words trembled, but her eyes didn't. Kael stared at her for a long moment, his breathing uneven. Then, slowly, he reached out not in anger, but in desperation and cupped her face in his hand. Mira, he said, his voice breaking. Tell me something only you would know. Tears welled in her eyes. You used to hum to calm your wolf when it lost control. The same tune Arwen sang, but she never knew why it worked. I did. Kael's thumb brushed her cheek, trembling. Because it was yours, she whispered. It always was. For a moment, time itself stilled. The bond between them pulsed faint silver light spreading from their marks, intertwining in the air. Kael's eyes glowed softly, not with fury, but with recognition. He inhaled sharply. I remember. The words left him like a prayer, and then his body shuddered, the mark on his chest burning white. He stumbled forward, collapsing against her. Mira caught him, her arms wrapping around him as if she could hold the pain inside him still. Kael, he gasped, his hand clutching her back. It's too much. Then let me bear it. And he was now to stand of the Tordidin, anningly one of common in the Prodiments. The light from their marks flared again, blinding and pure. Mira felt it then, the rush of every shared heartbeat, every lifetime, every broken promise finally coming undone. When the light faded, Kael was breathing evenly again, his head resting against her shoulder. He whispered, voice raw, You were the moon. Mira smiled through tears. And you were the wolf that chased it. He looked up, his eyes filled with something she hadn't seen before, peace, but also fear. If I remember, he murmured. What else will the curse take? Stay day. Whatever it wants, she said, but not us. For a long time, neither spoke. Only their heartbeats filled the silence. Outside, the storm began to ease, the rain softening into mist, and when the first ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, Kael whispered, Then let it come. Headed. The night was unnaturally still. Even the wolves had gone silent. The moon, pale and whole again, hung above Silverpine like an unblinking eye, watching, waiting. Mira knew what that meant. The debt was due. Kael stood by the window, the light casting his shadow long against the stone. The mark on his chest glowed faintly beneath his shirt, a quiet pulse that matched hers. He hadn't spoken since dawn, when the storm cleared and the bond finally settled between them, no longer a curse, but a living tether. Mira broke the silence first. You feel it too, don't you? And while fertilers withstayed. Kael nodded, his voice low. She's calling. The goddess? He shook his head. Arwen. Mira's breath caught. She's gone. She was, he said softly. But now that I remember everything, she's part of me again. And she's not at peace. I will see her. He turned, his gaze meeting hers, golden light flickering faintly in his eyes. When the bond awakened, it brought her spirit back. The moon's balance demands two halves of one soul, but it can't sustain three. Mira's heart sank. What does that mean? It means one of us must fade. Anyone have to fave to him anyway. The words hit like a blade. She felt it even before he said it, the slow weakening of her own heartbeat, the faint shimmer of her mark dimming. The curse wasn't done. It wasn't meant to unite them, it was meant to restore balance. One love reborn, one love released. Mira took a slow breath, steadying herself. Then it has to be me. Kael's head snapped up, fury flashing in his eyes. No, it's already happening, she said quietly. I can feel it. He crossed the room in 2 strides, gripping her shoulders. I won't let it. You can't fight the goddess. Set a disputing set of untypes of slatted in. I can fight everything else. Her eyes softened. Kael, you spent half your life fighting fate, the other half running from it. Don't start again now. He shook his head, desperate. You think I can just watch you disappear? She smiled faintly. You already did once. And Taladin feared. He flinched as if struck. That was different. It's the same, she said gently. Only now. You get to say goodbye. Kael's voice broke. Don't do this. I have to. The mark on her wrist was flickering now, light pulsing slower, weaker. She lifted her hand to his chest, where the twin mark burned bright and steady. Your heart's stronger, she whispered. It always was. He caught her hand, pressing it against his chest. Then let it be enough for both of us. For a moment, neither spoke. The air shimmered around them, the faint hum of the bond growing louder, 2 heartbeats becoming one rhythm, one breath. Mira leaned closer, her forehead resting against his. If you could choose, would you forget me again? Kael's voice trembled. Never, even if it kills me. Had all used too long. It won't, she said softly. It'll save you. He pulled her closer, his hands trembling as if trying to memorize her shape, her warmth, the sound of her heartbeat. Mira, he whispered, voice breaking. I can't lose you. You won't, she said. You'll find me in the moonlight, like you always do. The glow around them grew brighter, the bond burning, consuming, purifying. Kael's tears fell silently as he held her tighter. I love you, he breathed. I know, she whispered. That's why I can let go. The light flared white and blinding, then silence. When it faded, Kael was on his knees, holding nothing but air. The mark on his chest dimmed, leaving only a faint scar. He looked around wildly. Mira? The room was empty. But outside, through the open window, moonlight poured like water across the floor. And in it, he heard her voice. The moon remembers every promise, Kael. Don't break this one. He bowed his head, tears streaking his face. I won't. Days turned into weeks. The pack noticed the change in their alpha, quieter, calmer, almost human again. He led with steady strength, but his eyes were always turned toward the night sky. In the nursery, Lyra giggled at nothing, reaching toward the window whenever the moon was full. Kael smiled faintly each time. She's here, isn't she? He whispered, and somewhere beyond the trees, in the silver haze of the forest, a soft voice answered, always. The forest had grown quiet again. Winter was giving way to spring, and the snow that once buried the valley was melting into rivers that sang softly through silver pine. The curse was over, but its echoes still lingered not in pain, but in memory. Kael stood on the balcony overlooking the northern ridge, the same place he once watched the moon rise beside Arwen, then beneath Mira. The world was gentler now, quieter. The scars on his chest had faded to faint silver, like a crescent moon carved into his skin, a reminder that even broken bonds can leave light behind. Behind him, a small voice called, Papa? He turned. Lyra stood in the doorway, her hair tousled from sleep, clutching her stuffed wolf. She was taller now, her eyes the same silver as the woman who had given her life. But her smile was Mira's. Kael knelt, opening his arms. She ran to him, laughing. He lifted her, spinning once before pressing a kiss to her forehead. Her warmth settled against his heart, and for a moment, the ache in his chest quieted. Did you dream again? He asked. She nodded. About the lady. What lady? The one in the light, Lyra said, her tone solemn in the way only children could be. She told me not to be scared. Kael froze. What else did she say? Lyra smiled. She said the moon is a window, and if I look long enough, I'll see her smile. Kael swallowed hard, his voice rough. Did she tell you her name? Lyra nodded again. She said it was Mira. End the round of Wallace to Spicking. The wind stirred, soft and cold, carrying the faint scent of lavender through the open window. Kael closed his eyes. Thank you, he whispered. That night, after Lyra had fallen asleep, Kael returned to the balcony. The moon hung low, full and white, no longer cursed, no longer red, just luminous, whole. He poured 2 glasses of mead, setting one beside him on the stone ledge. "For you," he said softly. "For both of you." The night answered with silence and then, faintly, with song. It was the same lullaby he'd heard in his dreams, the one Mira used to hum when Lyra cried. He closed his eyes, letting it wash over him. In the melody, he could hear them both, Arwen's sorrow, Mira's warmth, and something deeper still. Peace. "You kept your promise," he murmured. "You brought me home." He didn't notice the figure at first, a shimmer of light at the edge of the terrace. When he looked up, she was standing there, half shadow, half moonlight. Mira. Not a ghost, not a dream. Just presence. Her eyes were soft, her smile faint, the same one that had undone him the first time she whispered his name. "Still watching the sky?" she asked, her voice like wind through leaves. "Still chasing it," he said. She laughed, a sound so fragile and real it made his throat tighten. "You were never meant to chase the moon, Kael," she said gently. "You were meant to walk beside it." He stepped closer, his hands trembling. "Then stay." "I can't," she whispered, "but I'll never be gone." She reached out, her fingers brushing his cheek warm, solid for just a heartbeat. "You have her now. That's enough." He caught her hand, holding it against his skin as if he could anchor her there. "Will I see you again?" Tenjai. Her gaze softened. "Every time the moon rises." Then the wind stirred again, scattering silver petals through the air, the last trace of her fading into light. Kael stood there long after the vision was gone, his hand still lifted, his breath slow. He didn't cry. He didn't need to, because for the first time in years, the ache wasn't emptiness. It was memory full, alive, whole. At dawn, the first sunlight touched the Silver Pine Valley. Lyra stirred in her sleep, whispering softly, "Mama, it is not wasteen." A single moonbeam slipped through the window, landing on her face, gentle, golden, warm. She smiled and turned toward it, and somewhere beyond the mountains, beneath the endless pale sky, the goddess watched in silence. 2 souls had been torn apart. 2 souls had found their way home. The curse was never punishment. It was remembrance, because the moon doesn't forgive. It remembers. Always. The end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss the next chapter of fate, love, and redemption. Until then, keep your heart open and your eyes lifted to the light that never forgets.